There you go. We're going to need to sort this out a little bit later. This little doohickey thing is, it's not tight enough, so it's sort of, it's a little weird. Okay, we're going to sort this out. We're going to turn off the autofocus too, because there's nothing I like less than autofocus. Whoa! Let's get me focused first. There we go. All right, great. We're focused, and we've turned off autofocus. We're live on YouTube. We should be streaming to LinkedIn. And now, let's just see. Okay. All right, let's go live and see what happens. Great. Yeah. I need to get a better transition between the countdown screen and then this screen, but we'll get that going on. Hello, good morning. But I got to tell you, it looks so cute. It looks so cute. I'm actually really excited. So this morning, so one of the things in terms of how I like to do anything, right, is iterate. There was a time where I felt like everything that I needed to do, like I had to have it be perfect, right? I'd say that I was a perfectionist. So here, you know what? I don't know why I don't put this up there so I can actually see myself, because it's kind of weird to not be able to see anything. Hold on, there we go. Let's do that. Oh, much better, much better. Okay. So anyway, so I was a perfectionist, which meant that every single thing that I did had to be perfect before I would do the thing. So if I was writing a policy, everything had to be absolutely perfect, the dots and the I's and the T's crossed and everything. And then, a spreadsheet, everything had to be perfect. If I was going to go live, like I just did, everything had to be perfect. And I would tie myself up in knots, just trying to be perfect. And I just realized I want to make sure that sound is actually coming out of this. If I was writing a policy. Perfect. Okay, sound is coming out of it. So at a certain point, after I left research administration for a few years, ran a boutique, ran some businesses, did a whole bunch of stuff. I was doing res admin as like a consultant, but it was really almost like a side gig because I was doing a lot of different things at the time. And I, and I connected with this coach who said to me that, perfectionism is just another way of saying I never get anything finished. And I was like, whoa, that's harsh. That's harsh. But then I started to think about how many things that I had been working on that I was waiting for them to be perfect or complete or done in the way that I would consider them to be perfect, complete, or done before handing them off to the next person. And whether that person be a client, like I'm posting a course online that someone's going to buy, right? Or if I'm like, hey, listen, I got to finish this spreadsheet or so on. Now I must have been in my 30s, so this would probably be about 10, 15 years ago, maybe. No, late 30s. So it's probably more like 8 years ago. And so I then started to really recognize, and I bought this book called Finish by John Acuff. And I read it and I was like, you know what? I could see how I prevented myself from completing a lot of things because of my perfectionism. So I actually just kind of tossed out, I'm a perfectionist as part of my identity. And I'm not a perfectionist. I am someone who gets it as close as we can to done, as good as we can to done, as correct as we can. But then I'm going to send it along, and then we together collectively will work and build something that is what people need. Not necessarily what is perfect, because even what I consider to be perfect, I'm going to hand it off to somebody else. And then they're going to be like, oh, well, these are the 10, 15 things that are missing. But in my mind, it was perfect, right? So you need that collaborative and communal environment to actually create the thing in perfection that we're trying to create, but yet we try to do it inside. So for me, for this kind of video, I've done this many times now. I knew that I was going to get caught up in my own, like, oh my God, I want to have this, I want to have this, and I want to have this, and I want to have my logo, and I want to have my graphics, and I want to have everything scheduled, and all these things. And that's all great. But I had to iterate to it. So like the first live that I did was just sort of like, bleh, right? You just go live and talk. And then I had graphics, and now I have some other cool stuff, which is fun, right? So the moral of the story, I guess, is that if you are someone who feels this immense pressure to be perfect or to get it done perfectly, and for many of us, these are ideas that were honestly oppressed upon us, like in that, because, you had to check off all the boxes, you had to do all the right things. So I'm not saying that any of this comes from like a not real place. It comes from lots of real experiences in real places. However, I think at this stage of many of our careers, it's actually holding a lot of us back, and it's interfering with progress as opposed to actually doing what it is that we're trying to do, which is get things done quickly. So anyway, so that was my thought this morning. I woke up, I wake up in agony a lot of mornings, so that fibromyalgia. So I woke up and I was like, oh my God, I'm in agony. And then, if I take a shower right away, usually I'll get like a shower thought. And that was my shower thought for this morning, is I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited. I'm going to show you a picture of like a Stream Deck I have that lets me just press a button and kind of change from scene to scene. And then I have one that'll play like news music in a minute. I'll play that for y'all. It's going to be super fun. But it's like, moving on up. I got new fun technology. Okay, but that's not why we're here. We're here because of research administration, even though I'm sure you're very excited to hear my story about perfectionism. Okay, okay, this is actually really funny. I need to know. I actually have to go to LinkedIn now to see if there's anybody here with me, because I am dying to know. If anybody was on the, were you on the, I should probably mute this so that I don't hear myself talking. Were any of you on the OMB meeting last week that the White House did? If you were, I was there. So we were all there. Like, there were thousands of people apparently. And oh, fabulous. There we are. Okay. And it was super funny because there we go. Okay. All right. So, where did that thing go? All right. So there was a meeting last week about the changes to the OMB circulars, right? And honestly, I signed up for it like super quick without actually paying sort of attention to like what it was exactly about, because I thought they were going to be talking about the changes and whatnot. So I get on this session. Cyra's on this session too, because we both signed up for it like super quick. And so I sat there, pen at the ready. I'm ready. What have you got to say to me? Okay. This meeting was a giant 1-hour session of people patting themselves on the back for doing a great job. So Julie gets up and pats John on the back for doing a great job. John gets up and pats Jackie on the back for doing a great job. Julie gets up and everybody's walking around just, you did so great and thank you. And here's the thing. I am so down with that. Like, I believe everybody needs to be thanked for all of the things that they did. And it's fabulous that they did all these things. However, after 44 minutes of each individual office thanking the individual office, fortunately, I by this point started doing something else. I realized that I was not going to get anything out of this particular conversation. However, I'll tell you one thing I did hear over and over and over again. So as everyone was thanking everyone else, some of the key items to come out of this conversation were that, one, there is a recognition that the amount of compliance, regulations, and requirements and administrative paperwork that has been piled and piled and piled up in the OMB circular over the course of the last decade, and then the way that individual agencies have been interpreting those guidances and then issuing their own guidelines based off of that, has resulted in a log jam of paperwork, and it is contributing to the significant vacancies, significant backlogs, significant issues that exist within organizations all across the country right now, right? It's cascading down because when people were putting these compliance rules in place with the best intentions at heart, one would hope, they did not take into consideration the long-term impact that these kinds of changes were going to have on the workforce that's actually doing the work, right? So it's obvious now that they have seen how it's become basically a tsunami of paperwork. And now basically all everybody's doing is filling out papers and more papers. And some papers are contradicting other papers. So the clear message that rang true through every single person's "thank you, you're amazing" speech was that we recognize that this has happened and that our initiative and the changes are intended to reduce that administrative burden and try to get things back on track while not sacrificing compliance. So that seemed to be what they were saying, which I'll be honest, it could have been an email, but I get it. You know, I mean, if you're the one person being thanked, it's very meaningful. So I totally get it. But I could have used an email that just says, listen, we get it. But at the same time, I think the fact that like 10 different agencies within there are like, hey, thank you, and also reduce administrative burden, and hey, thank you, and also reduce administrative burden, and so on and so forth, it says that at least the conversation is happening, because as all of us know, this whole situation that we find ourselves in terms of research administration, lack of new talent, overwork, burnout, and so on, is the result of a house of cards of issues. And one of those is just such a giant administrative burden. And what this is going to help us do is kind of reduce that. Now, though I found the conversation to be very heartening, and Gil Tran from Attain has done some great work on talking about how those changes are going to manifest, the ones that were specifically, there was a notice, 24084. I've already written the summary for intent, so it's got the links in there so you can access it from there. But if you wanted to see it in advance, it's OD 24084 from notice. And it talks about some of the changes that are going to be effective for the applications going in after January 25th, right, for 2025. So now most of the things in this particular notice pertain to training grants. There's a couple of things in here, but most of it is really just for training grants. And they've got some simplified review criteria for research project grants, revisions to the fellowship applications and the review process, updates to reference letter guidance, updates to the NRSA training application. They're going to introduce Form I. So Form I is going to be coming out soon. That's going to then replace Forms H to accommodate for these changes. And then this one is a big one, right? And so, and it's the adoption of a uniform other support and biosketch document for across agencies. So one of the things that I think we've all noticed is that you've got your DoD, you've got your NIH, you've got your NSF, you've got all of these different organizations that they all have their specialized other support. And so we have to maintain like 50 different documents. Part of this is going to be streamlining those kinds of documents. And then one of the things that they mentioned in the big old thank you hour-long conversation was that this is like the agency that's kind of governing the rest of them. And so they're going to be working with the individual agencies like the NIH and the DoD and so on to figure out how they're going to reissue their guidance documents and their announcements and so on and so forth to reflect some of the changes that they're talking about. Now, the changes, again, that just came out last week, where these are not like, Gil Tran talked about some really cool ones related to subawards and related to effort, and we talked about those in intent last week. But for these ones seem to be mostly geared towards training and fellowships, other than the biosketches and the common forms, which I think is something that we've all been thinking about for a really, really long time. It's problematic. Like, 400 different other supports. Like, why do we need them all? Why? Also at the bottom, so in the intent summary, so for anybody who's like, listen, I don't want to sit and listen to you for an hour, which is fine. Not everybody does. Some people like to listen and just keep it on in the background as they're like almost like a news show or a broadcast. But for others, it's easier just to read. So there's, I typically send out a summary within a few days after intent. And then, there's a link there to Mike Lauer from the NIH, who basically did like here's the summary of what is in the notice and so on and so forth. So we can go from that. Okay. Now, check this out. And now the news. Come on, do the thing. This week on Research Administration News, that was really fun to do, by the way. That was really fun. I think I need to do it every week. It's a little long. I may clip it a little bit, but I'm down with it. Okay. Okay, so NASA FFRs. If you're trying to submit your NASA FFRs and you're waiting for them in the PMS system, you might be having trouble right now. This was the case as of on Friday. There were like organizations all over the country who are unable to access their FFRs. So everyone's crossing their fingers actually in hopes that the implementation of it will actually get delayed again. But someone on the Res Admin mailing list talked about how they were working with the UA to see if there was a way that they could create like a single data table and send that in instead of having to manually key in all of the FFRs. So join the Res Admin mailing list where there's a conversation happening about this right now, and then there's a contact there. But if you join it now, you may not actually get the name of that contact, so you can also email me and I'll let you know who it is that's working on it. And then you're welcome to reach out to them and talk with them about the NASA FFRs. But I thought that was it's so funny. There was an organization that I worked with once who, when they were doing their drawdowns. So this was a small, really tiny organization. Like, it's one of those places that, gets like 1 or 2 grants, and it's not just something that the PMS is not something that they use very often. And they were pulling down the direct, but not like the indirect, because PMS is weird, right? It's like an 800,000-year-old system. And so it turns out they had a lot of money that they could actually have been pulling down, which is, that's great, because then you're like, hey, look, you have all this money. So that's always fun. But it baffles me. I still to this day, I'm just like, I do not understand how we're still using this GeoCities system. I just don't even understand that. Okay. So anyway, so that's one thing. The other thing, and this is as of again last week, that the old parent announcement for the R01s, it expires on May 8th. So if anyone is trying to register for a grant that's due after that, then they're not going to be able to register for the parent R01. My understanding is that this one, like, there are definitely going to be obviously a new announcement, new forms coming out before January 25th, 2025. But somewhere between now and then, the question is like, are they just going to extend this announcement or like just issue a new one? But one of those things will happen. I would just sort of sit back and wait. If you've been doing this before and you've been through these changes before, then just sit and wait and eventually it'll happen. But if you're new to research administration and you're wondering what the story is with these kinds of applications, a lot of times if they are going to be making changes, they'll kind of like kick the can to the curb, kick the can down the road as far as they can. And then just issue it. Either they'll just be like, oh, we're going to extend it until they issue the next forms or whatever. So one of two things will happen, but you'll just have to sit tight in the meantime. I would not recommend registering it for a deadline prior to that and trying to sort of like just hoodwink that thing, sort of get it in. That's not going to work. Okay. Then one other thing, and this was interesting. So I typically just go into the news and like do a search for, research administration, because I'm always curious to see like how are we showing up in the news, because it's not a very well known job, and so like a lot of us only know research administrators if we're already in the field or if we like are related or married to one, right? But it's interesting. So this is fascinating for anyone who's a consultant. This is actually super, and anyone interested in consulting, this is actually super interesting. So I went to a women's expo yesterday in Marshfield, and it's a, women's expo, jewelry, local businesses, that kind of thing. Super fun. And I went as a representative of the South Shore Women's Business Network, where I am the membership chair. If anyone's in the South Shore, message me. You want to join this? It's awesome. We're so much fun. We hang out. We have lots of, it's like a social group, but also like a business building group. It's great. Anyway, so while I was there, I met 2 people who like we're just talking, right? And so I have 2 sets of business cards. I have my business cards that are my podcast, and then I have my business cards that are my research administration. Now, my podcast is a limited edition podcast. I've actually decided to end it after episode 100. So this is Stop Shitting All Over Yourself. It's going to end after 100 episodes because I'm going so deep into some of this. I'm having so much fun with workforce development and speaking and my courses and consulting. I just don't have as much time as I used to. And I really am really passionate about all things research administration. So, the podcast, I feel like it has like a really great set of tools and resources, right? But I don't know that I need to keep creating on it. So I don't know that I need that podcast card anymore. However, that's what I was carrying, podcast card. I wasn't carrying the research administration card because I actually didn't know if I would meet anybody who would know what research administration was, because we're such a niche industry, right? And it's like, and I need to get better at explaining it. But come to find out, as I'm standing there, I'm talking to one person, and turns out she's a pilot and she's a sailor, and she does all these crazy things, and she looked like Carmen Sandiego, like right away, with a different hat, but yet still Carmen Sandiego. And she tells me that, wow, my goodness, I have so many friends in this space, and they're all in biotech, and they're all academia who have left and started their own companies because of this thing that I'm about to share right now. Well, I think the part of it is because of this, is that how long it takes to get things to market. But, so I thought it was fascinating. And then, so as I'm leaving, because I basically did the rounds, and, as I was leaving, I was on somebody else's podcast. I was on the Marshfield Community Radio podcast. I actually have to figure out how to get that recording so I can post it somewhere. It was super fun. They asked me about my outfit, which I never saw that coming for me. Anyway, so I met this person, and she had a booth, and she's like, I'm a grant writer. And I'm like, you're a grant writer? And I was like, this is amazing. So we start talking about what kinds of grants she writes, and and it's like, and her grants are fascinating. So like, she works with many different types of organizations. And so this wouldn't be specifically research related, but like, I've been moving a lot into the community-based organization space, and how do you get grants for smaller businesses and smaller organizations that need the funding, but they don't know how to access it, right? So a lot of the consulting I do for money, I do pro bono work for organizations that honestly don't have the budget to hire a research administrator. And that is an area in which I'm very excited. And so I was like, oh my God. So I made like 2 or 3 connections. So something really interesting to sort of just keep in mind, if you are if you're a research administrative consultant, or if you're somebody who's thinking about becoming a consultant one day in the future, go to these women's expos, go to these general expos. I mean, I say women's expos because Socialize as a woman for 40 something years, and I'm a member of these groups, but there's many different places you can go, regardless of how you identify. You have to look online and find them in your local community. But I would recommend checking those out, because I've always gone to these things either as a vendor, because I've always had like side hustle businesses and things like that because I like to do a lot of different things, but not with my research administrator hat on. And then once I put my research administrator hat on, it's true what they say, the universe delivers if you just say the words, right? I'm like, universe, research administration, and lo, research administration arrives. It's amazing. Okay, so now how is this all relevant? So the thing that popped up in the news was the Biden's administration, I'm just going to read this out here, right? A little proposal to reinterpret the Bay Dole Act of 1980. So the way that they want to adapt it is, the proposal could enable the federal government to exercise margin rights, allowing it to seize patents when officials believe a product's price is too high, which many fear will stifle innovation and disrupt the current ecosystem that facilitates the transition of academic research to marketable products. Now, I think as consumers and as people who are like, I'm chronically ill, and I find the cost of some drugs to be absolutely abhorrent, right? It's just horrifying. But at the same time, I'm also on the research administration side of it, where I see how difficult it is to get things to market, how long it can take, how difficult these patent conversations are. It takes forever. And I've been in spaces where investigators are frustrated because of just how everything is set up, right? So I don't know. I'm interested in seeing how this is going to play out over the next couple of years, because obviously there's concern, at the academic level, that this is going to create some interference in that space. But I'm also curious to see how this is going to impact investigators who are now leaving academia, or keeping one foot in academia and one foot out, to be able to sort of take care of marketing, like getting their own products to market, simply because of the pain and agony it takes to get things to market these days. So I find this to be interesting. It's like I have a bunch of resources in here to sort of dig a little bit deeper at this stage. The conversations are just happening, and there's a lot of academic organizations have actually already sent in their rebuttals to this, basically saying that they have some serious concerns. But that's something to sort of just watch in general, and see how that plays out. Okay. Alrighty. Okay. Now, what we're going to do now is I just realized I am iced tealess. So this is terrible. So we're going to press a cool button here that's going to take us to the countdown. Oh, wait, hold on. You know what? If I'm going to do that, I have to actually turn off my camera because I think I still have my camera on that one. So anyway, we're going to do the countdown. I'm going to grab some tea and then we're going to come back. So it's going to say 60 seconds, but it's not really going to be 60 seconds. Okay, now I'm going to press the button here. I'm not even pressing it on my computer, right? Because this is my little thing. Check it out. I'm back. I got some tea. Thank you. Thank you for the minute. I realized I was running out. I might need like a bigger mug. Oh, I designed this. Isn't that cute? I need to get a taller one. Maybe one of those Stanley ones that's made out of lead. Yes. Did you hear that the Stanley mugs have lead in them? And I saw one the other day. I'd never actually seen a Stanley mug before. And God, they're like this big. They're huge. I had no idea that they were so big. I mean, I have like a little, one that's like that big that I, take around with me from Bluestone Bank. But when I saw the Stanley cup, I was like, first of all, why are you still drinking from a Stanley cup? Are you sure it has no lead in it? And then two, wow, that's a really big mug. Okay. So this is actually, Ali and I, my wife and I were having this conversation the other day about how inclusive and accepting research administration is. And like, we have the same problems as the rest of the country, like in terms of equity, diversity, belonging, and so on. Like, I think, just living in the world we live in general, it's hard to get away from that. Oh my God, did I forget to hit record again? Oh well, such is life. But at the same time, at the FRAPRA event that I was at recently, what was super interesting for me about it is that there was such a wide variety of expressions there, right? I mean, there was racial representation, surely. There was national representation, surely. But there was also, like, putting those things aside, a lot of representation in terms of the way people like to dress, the way they wanted to show up, whether they were casual, whether they were uber professional, whether they were bright colors, like a rainbow, like me, and pink and oranges and whatnot, or whether they preferred more muted tones or whatever, it seemed like more people, and I don't want to say like, because there's always people who are still on the journey and still do not feel like they're seen, and still that we still have work to do, right? That's the demonstration of the work that we still have to do. But so many people are feeling more comfortable showing up as their authentic selves. And, I cannot deny that the island of Hawaii has like a beautiful, beautiful, like the land itself generates that kind of feeling within you. But, I think that one of the thing that I felt was that people are really, it almost feels like they're exploding with their inner light now, right? Which is very exciting. Like, we feel a little bit safer to do that. And I think that, for me, it was the biggest thing that impacted me was the, actions that were taken, right? So we're moving from like passive acceptance, right, to like actual social change. And I think that as I was looking at it, right, and we were like, because now we're moving, like, we have these, we had the quiet room, we had the land and labor acknowledgement, and like, as I was thinking about all of the changes that we're going through, it actually occurred to me that, we have guiding documents and practices at NCURA and in all of our organizations that were written decades before the work that we're doing right now, right? And so, is it time for us to go back to those things and start looking at them and like revisit them? Because, like, for example, it's my understanding that people who work on the conference have to pay for their registration. Like, let's just throw that out there as a thing, right? So if I work on an NCURA conference, I have to pay for my registration, right? I don't know where that's written. That might be written somewhere, but I feel like if somebody works on the conference, they shouldn't have to pay for their registration. They're doing so much work, right? So like, those are the sorts of things that I was thinking about in terms of like, equity. If somebody's putting in sweat equity, do they really have to pay for something else? And that kind of thing, right? And then it made me wonder, how many of our documents and our guiding documents, not just within NCURA, right? Like, because that's what started the conversation for me in my brain was like, okay, how many guiding documents within NCURA were written before we've already done a lot of this work within ourselves to grow and accept the inner light for people? Do we need to go back and look at those things and just make sure that they are written in an equitable way? But then at the same time, it's what about the organizations that we belong to, right? The systems and the hospitals, right? So you may have a SCDEI statement, but when you look at like the policies and practices around time off and remote work, like, does it support nursing mothers or people who are caregivers for children or dependent adults, chronically ill people, people with different religious practices, right? You may overtly say something like, well, I don't discriminate against you in particular, but like, if you don't allow for a flex work schedule, then the DEI statement doesn't really matter, right? And the reason why this came up for me, like all these things kind of came together last week, was because I read a post on LinkedIn and I thought it was so interesting. And I'm actually going to link it in the show, the article after this, because I think that it's so important, right? The article said, or the post said, we need to hire more mothers, right? And I absolutely agree. We need to hire more mothers. We need to hire more chronically ill people. We need to hire more people who cannot work outside the home, and people who are caregivers to children or adult dependents, right? But first we have to ask ourselves, like, because I think we all spiritually were like, oh yeah, that's great, I want to do that, right? But the question becomes, are we creating the environments that are hospitable to mothers, right? If you want to hire more Black women, look at your organization to see how many Black women are happy there, or how many have left because it was easier for them to leave than to work within a system not designed, and in some cases actively designed to oppress and deny their experiences, right? So one of the things that I looked online is I was like, oh, that's so interesting, right? Like, what are we doing to create these hospitable environments? And so I went online and I was like, okay, like, what are 7 things, right? So because I was curious, I'm not a mom, right? But like, I want to be, okay, I want to create a hospitable environment for mothers, right? What would I need to do? And it was so interesting because it was stuff that actually would benefit not just working mothers, but it would also benefit caregivers to dependents, adult or child, chronically ill. Like, it actually benefits a lot of people. So here are the 7 tips. All right. One was, well, advertise the resources that you provide to working mothers. Don't focus on work history and gaps in work, right? Do not focus on work history, gaps in work, job hopping, things like that, because those are things that if somebody is a mother and had to take time off or leave a job because they wouldn't give her appropriate maternity or paternity leave, or parental leave, I guess is the more appropriate word. A lot of times organizations are focusing on these dates and these things that are antiquated ways of looking at that, right? And so how are we making sure that we're not missing out? And that's by not looking at these and by not focusing so much on the work history. Provide generous leave, offer flexible work hours, allow employees to work remotely, offer childcare, create a mentoring program. What's interesting about all of these is that most of them will help a lot of different groups of people, right? They'll help new people coming into the workforce. They'll help chronically ill people. It helps a lot of different people. And so what was really interesting to me was that I think this is, this is what I think it means, right? When we say that when you are practicing inclusion, you may center one person or one type of person. So I center Black women, right? I center Black women in my work, right? But when you center Black women, you will, and Ruchika Tulsian talks about this, you will get a giant swath of people as well, right? So you're helping so many people, right? And I think that's so fascinating. In the Collaborate community this week, Tanya asked a really powerful question that was inspired by our attendance at the Learn conference, related to how so many people code switch, right? Where either they sound too California, or they don't sound smart enough, or they use the wrong word, or whatever. And let me actually rephrase. It's not the wrong word. They use the word that people have come to expect to be said a certain way because of the years of conditioning, right? And so she has this really great conversation about how have we masked ourselves in our workplaces. And a lot of people who mask themselves in their workplaces have been doing it for so long, they don't even know that they're doing it, right? And so for those of us who feel that way, these kinds of these kinds of things that would make life easier for a working mother would also make life easier for us, right? Because we would not have to change as often, and we would be able to be in our authentic spaces as much. And Syra and I have a really great video coming out about this, I think it's today or tomorrow, where we talk about when you have a workforce that feels like they are truly safe to be in their authentic spaces, and they can be themselves, and they can speak how they want to speak, and they can engage with their customers, clients, and managers, and PIs, everybody in the way that's most comfortable for them, they show up 100,000 times better than they would if you forced them into the box and made them check items off of a list to say, did you do your recons? Did you do this? Did you do that? Those will check items off of a box, but this other thing actually creates that momentum, which is like super, super exciting. So I think that like one of the things for me is that now that I've started looking at things in this way, like what I see is so many great opportunities for inclusion, right? And so an example I want to share with you is it's something so simple. So I was at I go to a bunch of conferences. So I was at a conference, and the person sitting next to me was allergic to mushrooms and had put that on their sheet when they registered. And the person next to that person was a vegetarian. Okay, so those two people are sitting next to each other. And the food came around the table, and it was meat of some kind, and all of us got the meat with mushrooms on it. Every single person, the vegetarian, the mushroom allergies, the whole 9 yards, right? And I listened to the conversation that they were having, and they both felt unseen. Like, why did I check this off of a piece of paper if you're not going to do anything about it, right? And I immediately started to think to myself, how can we make it? And I'm not even on the committee, right? But I know that, okay, this is a hole we can plug, right? So I was at another conference at the South Shore Women's Business Network, South Shore Conference for Women. And what we did was we had like 4 different allergies. You had vegetarian, you had all different things, right? And each one had a different color. And we basically just printed them all out on these little, like just a sheet of paper that you cut up into like a stack of little slips of paper, right? So that each person could grab from the table what their allergies were. And then when we went to eat, they just put that on the table in front of them so that the servers knew, okay, this person gets the vegetarian, this person gets the fish, this person gets that, right? And to get some of those things going. And it's a small thing, but it makes such a big impact to 2 people who are probably not going to say anything. These 2 people may not say anything to anyone ever, but I noticed, right? Somebody else noticed. Someone else is going to say something. The next time they go to an event that is held by this same group, guess what? They're not going to get mushrooms, and they are not going to get meat. And that is, I think, like where inclusion starts to come in, is you start to pay attention to individual needs. And I feel like one of the things that's happened is we've tried to make everything so generic. We've genericked ourselves out of individuality, really. Like everything has just got to be, well, we can't do this because of blah, right? And you know, I was talking to someone the other day about, you know, there's real reasons why that may be hard. You know, so what if you're at like an organization where somebody has a pet allergy, right? And someone else needs a service dog, right? Like, I mean, they both have very valid reasons for wanting and not wanting an animal in the space. I think in the prevailing wisdom would say, look, we're just going to put this thing in place that says no animals, and that'll solve that problem, right? And yeah, okay, that does solve the problem, but then you leave this one person now tense, anxious, you know, so on and so forth. Now, you can have remote work. Great. Now that means that person can stay home with their animal. Perfect. Right. But what if you sat down and tried to find a different way to accommodate it? Is there another office? Is there a space? Whatever the solution ends up being. Right. But I think it's a lot harder to come up with individualized solutions than it is to just say, look, this is the rule, and this is, you know, this is just how it is. And I think that served us for a while, I guess. You know, I would argue that like a lot of us grew up a lot of work trauma related to that, but we know better now, right? So we know better, we do better. Okay. So, if you want to read more about these kinds of things, I think like one of the key, because like in the end, this is all about creating more opportunity for people to join research administration. That's really what it is, right? Like if we want to attract more people to the industry, we have to be an attractive industry. And truthfully, I think we are an extremely attractive industry. Like just to begin with, it's a great job. I love research administration. I love how inclusive it is. I love the work that we do. What I love most is that I feel like we're all on dual journeys. Like we've got our research administration journey, but I feel like the kinds of conversations that we all have together are about like, they're about growing as people too, which is like really exciting. And I think it's rare to find a job like that. And I feel like part of what we're doing is we're not just trying to hire mothers or champion LGBTQ representation or understand neurodivergent practices. What we're actually trying to do is like ingrain these values into our organizational DNA where we care about each individual, right? Whatever that individual has in their journey, I care, right? And how do I find out about it? I talk to you about it, right? Because true inclusivity doesn't actually stop at intention, right? It starts at the actionable stuff, and it actionable changes that happen when someone says, "Oh, I felt excluded," and you're like, "Here, let me figure out how we can include you and let's succeed together on that," right? So there's a couple of resources in the post that's coming up for the article that I share that I talked about. Devin Price has a really great article on masking if you're autistic, during job interviews. I think it's a really good read if you are somebody who interviews people, because you may start to understand the kind of anxiety and tension that goes through a neurodivergent brain during interview processes. The other thing that I wanted to sort of leave on today before we talk about my Region One, right, is Syra started, is an instructor with the Stack Pipeline program, which has started this week. It's super fun. I've been working with them for a while. And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it up is because as we talk about filling vacancies and things like that, you may be looking for ways to train your new research administrators or figure out how to get them on board. Like if you hire somebody who you're like, listen, I'm going to hire this person who has no experience in research administration, but they have all the right skill sets, I personally believe that's the way to go. I love that. I just love it, love it, love it. I love hiring people with no research administration experience who have those right skill sets that then we can transfer in because they bring such newness, right? The Stack Pipeline program is one of the things. It's awesome. First of all, it's awesome in that it's designed to kind of help onboard, get the basics out. Syra's teaching it, but then one of the things that we're working on is figuring out how can we plug the hole, right? So like now you've taught somebody the pipeline, so that's great, right? So now they know about research administration, but what about that receptor piece on the organization side where it's like, okay, you now know about labor cost transfers. Let's talk about how do we do labor cost transfers here. So one of the things that we've been talking about is how do we create that receptor area, right? So that basically it's like, okay, now we've taught them the pipeline. Here's your checklist and onboarding and support and so on to be able to, how do you take that to the bridge it to the next space? So I think the pipeline programs are fabulous. I actually am not a big fan of creating internal pipeline programs anymore. I feel like research administration, like there's a lot of internal pipeline programs that are absolutely fabulous. And if they're already created, that's great. But I'm not entirely sure that internal pipeline programs serve like the amount of time, effort, energy, unless it's like a full-time job. I don't know that it is worth the time and energy and effort that needs to get invested. But I also think that it solves the problem for onboarding, in terms of making sure that like people are acculturated in the way you do things at your organization. So that I think is the area that sort of needs to be plugged in, and I would absolutely love it. So this is like, so the reason I'm bringing this up is actually because I love this conversation and I don't have all the answers, and I would like to have some conversations with people who already have pipeline programs, who maybe use external pipeline programs, who are doing it internally. Like, what are your thoughts, right? Because like I've seen it in a couple of places, and it's labor intensive. I mean, pipeline programs are labor intensive anyway, but over the last 5 years or so, I've come up to the mind that like for software and training programs, I think you really want to be, either you need to have a team dedicated to it, or you need to externally outsource it to people who have a team dedicated to doing it. Like that's sort of where I sort of fall. But I'm open to conversation because I think that this is where the rubber hits the road for a lot of us. The other thing that and this is a shameless plug, everyone. I wish I had I'm going to actually put a sound in here for shameless plug so we can just do it. Every time I say shameless plug, you'll be like, da, da. Like the John Cena thing. Da, 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 da. Hire consultants like me or Syra or other consultants. It's not just me or Syra. But what you're looking for is this. Historically, consultants have been coming in, solving problems, creating processes, helping you with streamlining, so on and so forth. But if you have a consultant, and you have to like know that the consultant does this. So I'm saying I do this, right? Sarah does this, who knows enough to know what the new person needs to know, and they act almost like a coach, right? So I was a business coach for many, many years. And so one of the key things that I learned how to do was, how do you teach someone without doing it yourself, right? How do you say, right, I'm not a member of Duke, let's say, but I can coach this person through the onboarding process at Duke, even not being a part of Duke, right? Because of my vast experience in research administration. There are other consultants who are like this. These are people who are probably going to have many, many, many years of experience. I know a lot of them. So if you're looking for someone and I'm not the one, don't worry, I can hook you up with somebody else. So just message me and be like, hey, I'm looking for this. And because again, it's not all about me. It's actually about how do we create a more excited, effective, less overburdened research administration workforce, right? Like that's the mission here. So I've got lots of connections on that, but here's what you're looking for. If you yourself are looking, this could be either somebody who just left. So if you have someone from your institution who left and took 50 years of institutional knowledge, try to hire them, pay them, right? If they're not down with that, then look for somebody who has a lot of experience. They're going to have about 20 years of experience, like, because they need to have been around, done around. They need to know what's important, what's not important. They need to understand contextual history, right? Because for a lot of these things, but they also need to know enough to know what they need to coach someone in, right? And so that's the key, is you're not looking for someone who's only 5 or 6 years in, because at that point they have experience, but they may not necessarily have the experience to be a coach or a mentor, right? So that's what you're really looking for, is someone with a lot of experience and someone who actually has an interest in it, right? So for example, if your person who left doesn't have any interest in it, then you say, hey, listen, I'll pay you money to do it. They're probably not going to enjoy it, right? Probably not going to enjoy it. Okay, we are at the end. Look at this. Oh my God, so good. All right. We're at the end. And now here's what I'm going to leave you with. Do not forget, if you were in Region 1, if you are in New England, you want to come. Oh, here we go. Oh no, I froze. Shit. I hate it when I freeze like that. I wonder how long ago I froze. That's shitty. Look at me. I'm frozen. You're probably not even seeing it. Oh, no. That's fine. You can hear me. Let me turn off I'm going to turn off my camera. Nope, that's not it. Come on. Oh, yeah, it's going to be there. There we go. Nope, that's not it. Well, this is the very end. Oh, my God. I have to turn off this thing. So this is like a thumbs up thing. Every time I do a thumbs up. Okay, let's turn off the camera. Oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do this. Annoying. Well, it is what it is. All right. So here's what we're going to go with. We're going with, first I need to turn off my thumbs up. That's happening for sure. That thing's going away. Second is I am the keynote speaker at Region 1, NCURA Region 1. I am the keynote speaker, and I'm going to be wearing these horns. I'm going to tighten them up a little bit. Actually, the horns stay on my head a lot better than this scarf does. Like, this scarf falls off all the time, but these horns are like locked on here. So I'm going to be the keynote speaker, but forget about me. There's actually going to be a lot of really, really, really cool sessions. We have great sponsors. It's going to be in Portland, Maine, where, by the way, they have the absolute best clam chowder in the whole world. I love it. I cannot wait to go. We're going to be there May 6th to 8th. You do not want to miss on my speech. I'm just going to say, people are going to ask, they're going to be like, oh my God, where were you during Minessa's keynote? And you don't want to say you weren't at Region 1. That'd be so sad. It'd be really sad. I'll miss you. Otherwise, I'm going to see you next Monday at 9 a.m. And then in the meantime, stay tuned. We have some really cool stuff coming out today. We have email, how to hack your email. We've got some great conversations with me and Syra. I have some clips from my podcast coming out with Shiva Ghee, amazing Dr. Bat Shiva Ghee, who's so amazing. Love her. Lots of things happening. So I will see you guys next Monday. See you folks. I'm trying to get rid of guys. See you folks next Monday. Have a great, great day. I wonder if I can do some news music. I don't think it's appropriate for right now, but we're just going to do it anyway.